Hello and welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about the cell theory. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. These are the unit and lesson titles for this video series. Under animal and plant cells, we have cell theory, prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cells, cell membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus, and organelles of a typical cell. In this video, we are going to focus on the cell theory. What is a cell? The cell is the smallest unit of life that is classified as a living thing and is often called the building block of life. It is the basic structural and functional unit of all known living things. If you can still remember our lesson on levels of organization, in order for something to be considered a living thing, it must reach the level of cells. So the two levels below that, molecule and atom, so if something is made up of just molecules or if it is just made up of atoms, they are not considered living things. So in order for something to be considered living things, it must reach the level of cells. So some organisms are unicellular. It means that they can exist, they can survive just individually, or they are just made up of one cell. So from the term uni, meaning one, then cell, cellular. While others are must exist in a multicellular status. So multi means many, so they are made up of several cells. So examples of unicellular organisms is Escherichia coli or E. coli. So this one is one individual. It's only made up of one cell. It exists as one cell. So it is a unicellular organism. While you and I, humans, the common plants, and animals that we know of, dogs and cats, all of those exist with multicellular cells because they're made up of hundreds and thousands and millions of cells and trillions of cells. Another way to categorize cells would be how big or small they are. So those cells that are too small to be seen by the naked eye and requires the microscope to be seen, we call them microscopic, such as your E. coli and other cells that we will tackle along the way. While we also have macroscopic cells, it means that they are big enough to be seen by the naked eye. Examples of those would be your chicken egg. So a chicken egg is actually an egg cell of a chicken, but it is it's just made up of one cell, but it is big. We can see it with our naked eye. We could have eaten it several times in our lives. So that's just one cell, but it is big, so we categorize that as macroscopic. We have something as big as an ostrich egg, as big as the human head, but it's still made up of one cell. This is just one cell, one egg cell, but it is macroscopic. The word cell is derived from the Latin term cellula, meaning small room. This was actually coined by Robert Hooke in 1665 when he experimented with his microscope, with this very simple microscope, and he took samples of cork. He took samples of tree barks and he looked at it under the microscope, and this is what he saw. He saw individual units, and he thought that they look like it reminded him of the rooms that monks and priests used to sleep in, and they are called cellula. So that's what he called it, small room, cellula. And eventually it was shortened into cell. In order for you to visualize different cell sizes at scale, I recommend that you visit this website from learngenetics.com. It's a fun interactive website that lets you play around with the different sizes of cells, and hopefully you will learn something from the comparison of cell sizes. Like what I've mentioned in my previous slide, no, the term cell was coined or just used by Robert Hooke in 1665. So he examined very thin slices of cork or tree outer covering of the tree and look at it under the microscope. And he also looked at different small insects using his microscope. This one is a louse, and he was able to draw its parts and appendages and its body segments because he looked at it under the microscope. He also published his book Micrographia, wherein he shared all the discoveries he's seen under his microscope. So again, going back, the word cell was derived because what he saw with that cork, with those cork cells, reminded him of honeycombs or small rooms that monks and priests used to sleep in. So he called them cellula. Eventually, it was shortened to cells. However, what's noteworthy about it is that even if he was the one who discovered it, Hooke didn't know what they are, their real structure and function. The first man to actually witness a living cell under the microscope was Anton Philips von Leeuwenhoek, who in 1674 was able to see the algae Spirogyra and named moving organisms that he saw as animalcules, meaning animal cules, small animals. Okay. He probably even saw bacteria. So this is one of the paintings of Leeuwenhoek, and this was one of his drawings. This is what he saw under his microscope, a tree section, and he saw there the um, different cells of that plant. I recommend that you watch this video, Seeing the Invisible, Van Leeuwenhoek's First Glimpse of the Microbial World. I will provide the links of these videos in the description below. Okay, so for the main topic of this video, the history of the cell theory, I recommend that you watch this video from TED-Ed entitled The Wacky History of Cell Theory. I will provide the link in the description below. So in 1839, Theodor Schwann and Matthias Jacob Schleiden, okay, were able to discover from their individual work that plants and animals are made up of cells. Now, in order for you to remember, here's something I will teach you. So, Schwann sounds like swan. So, he was the one, which is an animal, and he was the one who said that animals are made up of cells in his research, in his discovery. While Schleiden was the one who said that plants are made up of cells. So, from their separate observations and researches and experiments, they were able to discover that. In 1858, Rudolf Ludwig Virchow said that he discovered that cells can only come from already existing cells, from already living cells. So cells give rise to new cells. So it means that cells just do not just appear out of nowhere. They must have their parent cells. So together, Schwann, animals are made up of cells. Schleiden, plants are made up of cells. And Virchow, cells can only come from pre-existing cells. So together, the three of them completed the classical cell theory. So why is it important for us to understand the cell theory? Well, for the first reason that the cell theory is true for all living things, no matter how big or small. The statements of the cell theory is observable in something as small as an E. coli or an amoeba or a paramecium into something as big as a whale or as an elephant even as for a dinosaur. So no matter how big or small, how simple or how complex, the cell theory is true for all living things. Because cells are common to all living things, studying about them, studying about their origin and nature, everything about cells will give us more information about life, about living things. And because all cells come from other cells, according to Virchow, we can study how cells grow and reproduce. And we all know that in our lesson on characteristics of life, being made up of cells, having the ability to grow, and having the ability to reproduce are all important criteria of living things. You need to show these characteristics, these three abilities, in order for something to be considered as a living thing. So that's very, very important. And by learning about cells and how they function, we can also learn about different types of living things. So what makes animal cells and plant cells the same, and what makes them different? What makes us similar with a unicellular amoeba, and what makes us different from them? So by learning about the cell theory, by learning about the principles about it, we can learn more about other living things. I also recommend that you visit this website from Science Learning Hub, in which they explain why it is important to learn about cell theory. I will provide the link in the description below. So what are the statements, or what are the tenets or principles of the classical cell theory? So the first one, all organisms are made up of one or more cells. So we've learned about it. All organisms can either be unicellular or multicellular. Next, the cell is the unit of structure, physiology, and organization in living things. So the cell is the basic unit of living organisms. In cellular organization, this is the basic level, the lowest level in order for something to be considered a living organism. And from Virchow, all cells can only come from pre-existing cells. Cells do not appear out of nowhere. They have to come from an already existing cell. As time goes by, so does our tools in science, and so does our techniques in observation. So over time, our ability to see the microscopic world also improved. So from a very simple microscope into electron microscopes that we have right now, computer generated images, our theory on cells also continue to evolve. And as we discover more and more living organisms at higher and higher magnification, we learn more about them, and it allowed us to revise some of our principles of the cell theory. So, so these are the classical interpretation of the cell theory, the one that I discussed a while ago. But now, this is what we should really focus on, and the one that you should memorize, the modern cell theory, which still includes the basics of the classical cell theory, but adds more updated information. So this is the classical interpretation of the cell theory. So this is what we will actually memorize. This is what we should actually really pay attention to. So the first statement, all known. So in the classical interpretation, all organisms. So all living organisms. But here, all known organisms. It means that even those who are dead already, or those who have perished already, or those who have decomposed already, or those who went extinct, such as dinosaurs and primitive organisms, as long as you are considered a living thing, so you are made up of cells, and vice versa. So if you are established as a living thing, you must have been made up of cells. This part did not change, so it still says the same, that cells are the basic structural unit of life. So here, there's an addition of this statement. So in the classical interpretation, all cells come from pre-existing cells. In the modern interpretation, they included the process by division or by cell division, which is our lesson in the second quarter. So these are retained with some additions. Then these are the new inclusions of the modern cell theory. So number 4, cells contain hereditary information which is passed on from cell to cell during cell division. So they say, we've learned this in characteristics of life, that all organisms are capable of reproduction and by reproduction and passing on their genetic material through their genetic through heredity. So cells contain hereditary information that's essential, and that can be passed on from parent to offspring. All cells are basically the same in chemical composition. So all plant cells are basically the same. They're made up of the same elements, same molecules. If you extract an animal cell from whichever animal, if you look at it under the microscope, they practically are the same. They're made up of the same elements, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, all those stuff. So all cells are the same. And all energy flow of life occurs within cells. So the transfer of energy, photosynthesis, are performed by plants at cellular level, and cellular respiration, or the conversion of that food into usable energy, all of those flow of energy happens within cells, and we will talk more about this in the third quarter. Okay, so that ends our video. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.